Hello, hello, hello. We are here. We are live. New Sprint Ride Option podcast, part of the Blue Wire Hustle Network. I am Andrew Pasquini, joined as always by the nature boy, Jason Aponte. And we got a guest today. He is with Niners Nation. I'm going to call him the Texas Rattlesnake, Jordan Elliott. Jordan, I don't know. I just chose a random wrestling name there, and Stone Cold was the first
literally have never been to the state of Texas in my entire life.
What's Bret Hart? The best there was, the best there has been, the best there ever will be. Jordan Elliott, how you doing today, Jordan?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. It's definitely nice to be back home in the Bay Area. Had a great time in LA with the gentleman in the top left corner here. We got a lot to talk about, but happy to be home.
And Jason, also, you're home as well. How was the flight? How was everything? Just good life?
Well, the flight back was a little bit more interesting than anything. You know, I didn't realize that I booked Spirit Airlines, and that got a little bit hairy. But hey, I made it alive, and I think that the narrative around Spirit Airlines needs to be dialed back a little bit because the flight was fine. So do whatever you want with that information.
Hey man, the flight.
Hey, this is the. Oh, sorry, Andrew. Go ahead.
The flight flew from point A to point B, no issues. You got there. That's all that matters.
That's it.
Mike McGlinchey, Spirit Airlines, people taking one bad example and running with narratives out of it. I think that's the conclusion we can draw.
Absolutely, and way more solid than he's given credit for.
Yes, this has always been a very pro Mike McGlinchey podcast. And
so can we agree that Spirit Airlines is the Mike McGlinchey of the air travel industry is what we're saying?
I like it. It had one big moment where everybody focuses in on that, but they didn't focus in on the other 3,000 flights where people weren't shaking back and forth or anything like that. So yeah, absolutely.
I love it. We're starting out hot today. We could talk about Jimmy Garoppolo smiling if we want. Apparently that was a big news story, but I want to start with you guys because we haven't gotten a chance to talk about your guys' experience last week. You guys were out in LA for those joint practices with the Chargers. And you know, it's been a week, so I just want to get your guys' overarching. I want to hear you guys talk about it. I want to hear what you guys thought about everything, and also a little bit, you know, your guys' experience. I believe it was Jason's first time down in Southern California. So let's just get a general Jordan and Jason talking about their time in LA with the Niners and everything.
I had a blast, and you know, hanging out with Jordan is always something that's great. You know, and the next time I'm tired of going to California and not seeing Andrew Pasquini though. So if I had a complaint, it would be that. No, but I mean, you know, the Chargers obviously have a great bunch of skill position players on the offensive and defensive end. So this was going to be a great test for the 49ers to see where they were at. We talked to a lot of people there, and people were saying that the Chargers defense has been outperforming their offense as of late. But it was really nice to get those reps of, you know, Keenan Allen versus Jason Verrett, Fred Warner against Austin Eckler. Those were awesome. So it was really good, and it was really a good way to gauge where the 49ers are at right now. You know, Joey Bosa against this offensive line. It was a lot of fun, and you know, we got a chance to watch a lot of things that we were able to report first because the restrictions on videos were not as strict as they were when it came to the 49ers. You're not allowed to even have your phone out, anything like that. So that was pretty cool too. But overall, just an amazing experience. One for the books, something that we're gonna look back years down the line with whatever happens with our career path and say, man, remember that time that we just went out there and we made it happen. So yeah, I mean, I can't say anything more than that.
So LA, as everyone knows, is the land of stars. It's Hollywood. There are big names, celebrities all over the place. And let me tell you, the man who stole the show was Jason Aponte. I literally am not even exaggerating. Probably 24 times while we're down there, strangers on the street stopped this man and said that they loved his YouTube content. And I'm not talking just at the game or just at the practices. I'm talking about downtown Long Beach, Orange County, Westwood, like all over the place. These people, you know, Aponte was the man of the hour. So I just have to throw that out there. I know he definitely appreciates the positive feedback, but you know, it was a little draining. You know, it felt like everywhere we went, there were, you know, people just coming up. You know, he's just trying to be a regular guy enjoying Southern California. So I know he appreciates the feedback, but I was kind of like, wow, man, this is, you know,
listen,
a bit much.
With Jason Aponte, if him and I are walking down the street, they're stopping him and I, and they're like, "Hey, guy with the beard, can you hold the camera? I want to get a picture with Jason here."
That's literally how it felt. And, hey, I'm happy to be some, anonymous person. But, yeah, it really was. Like, I felt like I was walking around with, like, Leonardo DiCaprio or something. Like, this man
he's and let me just explain to you how much he's exaggerating. Yes, we ran into a bunch of people out there. It was cool. It was not that serious. I mean, we were out there with Brad Graham, and he had a line at training camp of people that were trying to, say what's up to him. I don't know if I'm on Brad's level just yet, but no, it was really nice. There's a lot of people who had a lot of nice things to say, and it makes you feel good because sometimes we think that we're doing this, for no reason on deaf ears, and that was really cool, actually. But yeah.
Yeah, and Javi in the comments had a great point. I actually have photo proof of me being essentially a limo driver for this man. He's in the back seat of my car as we're driving around Inglewood. I forget what we were doing. It was a short trip. I forget where we were going, but yeah, I have photographic proof of this. So I'm happy to do it. I'm here. I love my brothers here in the sprint ride option pod. I'm happy to do whatever, but I did feel like a bit of a chauffeur, so I just felt like I had to throw that out there as well.
Let's get to actual 49ers stuff, but let's wrap it with this. The way you were dressed, it kind of looked like the entire time you're the one who's pulling up like that. You look like that. You didn't open doors or anything like that, but you could see how someone could make that. But anyway, let's get to football.
we're going to talk football. We're no longer going to talk about how Jason Aponte has a star on the Walk of Fame in LA now, or we're going to football.
He might not have it yet, but it's coming soon. Like we have to realistically, there has to be a sprint ride option pod about whether or not the star comes before the 6th Lombardi, because I feel like that's something that's really pressing at this moment.
Oh my God! Everybody's just gonna tune out of this show. Let's go.
All right. So you guys are at the joint practices. So let's try and keep this. Let's pretend. Let's go in the time machine. Pretend like we haven't seen the game yet. The game that happened on Sunday. Jason and then Jordan, who stood out at the joint camps? Who didn't? Just kind of general thoughts on the camp in general.
See, Jordan was doing much better of a job of focusing in on other people. So who had more than me? But I'm just going to say the one right off the bat. And apparently today in practice, it found itself to be true. D Ford. D Ford's incredible. And this isn't just, D Ford's on the field. This is D Ford is dominating. And every single time he's in the backfield, I don't know how this was possible, especially when you consider what was said about him, what were the rumors about him, but D Ford looks amazing, man. And that's the first thing that jumps out at you right away. Jordan did a better job of looking at so many other position groups, but you are taken when you see how fast D Ford is in the backfield nearly every single time, no matter who's across from him.
Jordan, you unmuted yourself.
Okay, there we go.
It. There you go.
So the defensive line group as a whole was definitely the star of the 2 days, in my opinion. There was a day, I think it was Thursday. Was it Friday? I'm sorry. I don't have my notes in front of me. I apologize. One of the 2 days, they had 4 different edge players record multiple sacks during 11-on-11s. And that is really hard to do, particularly with the fact these defenses aren't game planning for any of this stuff. They're kind of just running out and doing a lot of, vanilla stuff. So I think that the offense definitely has the upper hand during these drills. So that was very impressive. And, sacks are subjective in training camp. They're not allowed to touch the quarterbacks, and the veteran players especially know that if you go and you lay a finger on the quarterback, you're going to get chewed out. So D Ford, for example, there was a day where I logged him at 4 sacks. I consulted with a couple people who had, and the thing is too, where we were at up in the bleachers, we make sure to go to the top because it's the closest you're going to get to an 11-on-11 view. And going back and watching, the way I personally, attribute a sack during training camp is if you get beyond the pads of the lineman blocking in front of you, and there's a realistic expectation that if you're going at game speed that you would get to the quarterback before he gets the ball out. I tend to even give it's kind of like a tie goes to the runner situation in baseball. Yeah. If it even looks close, I give it to the quarterback and I don't mark it down. So even factoring that in, I thought D Ford looked phenomenal. I think I logged him at like 8 pressures that day. He had 4 sacks. Arden Key had 2. Jordan Willis, who Jason and I have been to the majority of the training camp practices. We've been trying to tell people Jordan Willis is legit. He looks good. I know he has that 6-game suspension, but he's going to be a part of the team going forward beyond that, simply based on how well he has played. He's a guy, I think, that really demonstrates the value of Chris Kosterek and that defensive line with Darryl Tapp coming in as well, and that defensive line room where they took a guy who was a good athlete, 3rd-round pick out of Kansas State, was with the Jets for a while, showed some flashes. He had some flashes last year as well, but after a full offseason and the ability to be molded by that defensive line staff, he just looks phenomenal. And he's the one guy I've been telling people in my reports for Niners Nation and on the timeline on Twitter, he's the only defensive lineman that I've seen repeatedly give Trent Williams problems, and it is very difficult to beat Trent Williams once, let alone multiple times. So Jordan Willis is a guy people should be, should be excited about, not upset. And Arden Key is another guy who I think doesn't really get talked about as much as I think he should. He's been a phenomenal pickup, and he's out there in that sort of third, almost fourth wave of pass rusher. So the defensive line is just so deep. I will add, Rashawn Slater and Brian Bulaga, the starting tackles for the Chargers, did not participate in the joint practices. I was a very big fan of Slater's. I think he's going to be a tremendous player going forward. He's a rookie this season. And Brian Bulaga has been around the league for a long time. He's a long-time Packer. So those are two, pretty important pieces that were out that does need to be added in. But the 49ers, defensive players can't decide who's playing in front of them or not. And they just absolutely dominated the players in front of them. And I think people saw that carry over, especially with that second and third wave of pass rushers on that line. They didn't allow a single point in the second half against the Chargers during that game. So I would say the defensive line definitely stole the show down in Costa Mesa.
One more thing to add also, while you talked about, the defensive line, find someone who can hype you up the way that Chris Kosurik hypes up this entire line. I don't care what field this man was on. It could have been the far field, the close field. All you hear every single snap is, like every single play. I swear, this man, if you heard someone screaming in the Bay Area, guarantee you it was Chris Kosurik. That man really brings the energy to that defensive line. It was insane how much, it started to wear on him as the practice went on. He started to lose his voice, and I was just, how could it not at this point?
Yeah, and we saw a little bit of how good that defensive line was on Sunday. They honestly dominated the game, in my opinion. Jordan Willis had the safety. Zach Kerr, I always want to call him Steve Kerr just out of habit, but Zach Kerr, he was out there just making plays. The defensive line was just very good, and I'm glad you guys got to see that a little bit before the main event. That's pretty cool. I wish I was down there with you guys. As I said, Jason kind of alluded to that, but great to hear you guys have a great time with that, seeing the defensive line. I'm going to ask the obvious quarterback question. Did one stand out more or less in the joint practices?
I think what stands out more than anything is that Jimmy Garoppolo just really, I hate saying the same thing over and over. He is what he is at this point. Classic Jimmy Garoppolo 2-play sequence. Here it is on 7-on-7s. Remember, 7-on-7 has no pass rush or anything like that. He takes a look. He's skittish to throw the ball. He tries to force it in, near interception. Literally the next play, touchdown over the middle to George Kittle on a beautiful ball. The inconsistency is maddening at this point. He can literally one throw, make a throw where he said, what on God's earth was that? Then make a throw in the next play and look like somebody who's like a top 10 quarterback. And you're just like, why? So I think what really stood out to me was just Jimmy Garoppolo is who he is at this point. And, I know we got a report today out of camp, and he's smiling. We have been on the side of saying that we think that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to start week 1. We've said that since the trade up. Mm-hmm. And it seems like that's what's going to happen in week 1. But it's got to be frustrating. Everybody knows about the pick 6. We'll talk about that, obviously. But the pick 6 is more indicative of him just locking in on the same guy and Derwin James making a great play because he's a great player. But the inconsistency is maddening. Literally one throw where you're like, what on earth was that? The next throw, you're like, holy cow, did you see that? And that's the part of with Jimmy Garoppolo that a lot of people have problems with.
Well, I will say this. I think that the biggest thing that stands out about Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo is the ability to read the field. And I think that that's something people always talk about, how one's a rookie and the other's a veteran, and he needs to sit and all these things that go into that. But the ability to go through your progressions and read the field is something that I don't think it matters if you're a 10-year vet or a rookie. You either have that ability or you don't. And I'm not saying that Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't have that ability. I'm saying that Trey Lance looks far more comfortable doing it. So perfect example, when they rolled out Trey the last day of the joint practices, he took his first consistent reps with the first team where he was going to do something other than a designed run, which he had done during the training camp practices in Santa Clara. And, on his first pass attempt, it was off a play action, off the play fake. The coverage was good downfield, but I thought he looked a little nervous. He held the ball a little too long. But as he started to go through, I think he took 8 snaps that drive, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong. I'm sorry. I don't have my notes in front of me, so I apologize. But you could tell after each rep, he got more and more comfortable. And he just looked better when that first read was taken away. He looked much more comfortable. Whereas Jimmy, when that first read wasn't there, and a lot of it has to do, the hard thing with Jimmy is that I'm not going to speculate on what's going on in his mind and how he's seeing the field. That's just a fool's errand. I'm not even going to waste my time. So we have to really go off of what we're seeing from an outside perspective. And so much of his mechanics is everything comes in the hips from Jimmy. So he derives all the torque in his throwing motion from the hips. So there's times where he looks very skittish and he looks like he's, frantically moving around and stuff. But honestly, that could just be him trying to set his feet for that. Because that quick release, again, everything's in the hips and you have to have that quick hip, like hip twist. And I know Andrew, being a big fan of Florida State and Jameis Winston, can appreciate how much, how much that those mechanics when you're, deriving everything from your hips, how important it is. But it was beyond that. It wasn't just, he did not look comfortable. And the biggest thing for me, Jason kind of touched on, was during 7-on-7s, there's no pass rush. And he was double pumping the ball. He was double clutching. He looked like he was doubting himself a little bit. And again, I am just speculating. I'm not going to sit here and act like I know what's going on in the mind of Jimmy Garoppolo. But I do think that it was very evident that one quarterback looked more comfortable than the other. And it has to be a little bit concerning that that quarterback is the one who's been in the NFL, in an NFL setting for 4 months compared to the guy who's going into year 8. But at the same time, Trey Lance was not perfect. He had a lot of balls. He's still throwing a lot of balls high. He's putting a little bit too much velocity on his throws. I joked during the game, he threw a ball out of bounds, and the Chargers head coach, Brandon Staley, it was literally just, it looked like it wasn't like a laser. It was like a little, had a little bit of arc to it. And he couldn't even hang on. He went to get, catch it in his chest, and it bounced off. He almost fell over trying to catch it. So I'm like, wow, maybe there is a little bit of zip on these balls. These reports are pretty accurate. So I think Trey Lance needs to work on, putting a little bit more touch on his throws and not throwing balls high, because he did have a ball during practice. It was reported by some as an interception. The refs on the field ruled it incomplete. We had a great view of it. It clearly short hopped the safety sitting in single high, but it easily could have been an interception because he overthrew Debo. I think he was running like a glance route, which is similar to a slant over the middle. And the ball ended up 10 yards behind Debo because he put so much on it that it went over Debo and the defender trailing him. So he does have some things to work on, but I just think Trey Lance looks far more comfortable in the pocket with his footwork, with his, reading through his progressions, doing all the things you'd hope your franchise quarterback would do. He just looks better, but there's more to it than just, breaking down that one thing. I do think that in situational drills, up until very recently, Jimmy's had a substantial advantage there. So I think ultimately Jimmy will be the week 1 starter. I felt like that was pretty much going to be the case unless Lance really, truly blew everybody away. And not to say that he hasn't had his moments, but I just think that it's way easier to stick with Jimmy. And if he goes out and he plays the way he did week 1 last year, it's pretty easy to pull him pretty quickly. And even if he plays poorly, you have a good chance of winning those first 2 games on the schedule. Whereas if you roll Trey Lance out and he starts to struggle and then you have to go back to Jimmy, it just creates an issue that you can avoid entirely by putting Jimmy out there. And no disrespect to the Eagles or the Lions, but the way that those 3 teams are all constructed, the 49ers should win either of those games with ease. I honestly am not even, trying to exaggerate. I would pick them to win those games if Nate Sudfeld was starting to. That's how much I think there's a talent disparity between those 3 rosters. So I think ultimately, Trey had the better trip to Southern California, but I don't think that it's going to matter in terms of who starts week 1.
Yeah, and to piggyback a little bit off of what Jordan was saying, and that's the stuff that I was noticing while we were in camp, is Trey would have a throw or two where you're like, but he would always improve after that, right? He bounced back pretty quickly, and I think that's what you keep seeing, right? Even during the game. Started off a little slow through the interception, but he got better. He kept firing. He never got skittish. So that's another thing that you have to be impressed with, especially when you're talking about a 21-year-old. So that's something that's been carrying over. That's a constant. That is a constant. So that's something that you really can hang your hat on. By all means, by no means was he perfect. By no means was he perfect. There's plenty of, I kept tweeting, ball placement, ball placement, ball placement. There's 2 things that can be true. The ball can be high and the receiver was supposed to catch it. Both of those things didn't happen. The guys were leaving their feet plenty of times, especially when I rewatched it, even on easy throws. So, and the other thing is Jimmy Garoppolo is getting 1 series per preseason game. Trey Lance is getting a chance to continue to work through that. So that's some more context to it, And that's what I'm talking about. It's like, okay, you can say all those things about Jimmy Garoppolo struggling, in practice or maybe just not exceeding expectations, but he's only getting 1 series on the field and then he's right off the field. Trey Lance, if he has a bad series, he's getting thrown back out there and able to work through it. So those are the 2 things that really are a little bit different when you're talking about comparing their performances and how they've been taking it.
Yeah, and Roger, we see the question. We'll get to this one in a minute just because we are going to talk defensive line because I think this is a perfect transition to the game on Sunday. The Niners beat the Chargers 15-10. They moved to 1-1 in the preseason. That means nothing. But I like what you guys said about the defensive line in practice because we saw that in the game. And now what you're saying about Garoppolo versus Trey Lance, I think we saw that in the game a little bit too. Garoppolo came out, looked like, what we expect from him. I thought he definitely improved on the Kansas City game. I think that's a given. I think his best throw of the game, it was an incomplete pass. It was a pass interference against Ayuk, or it was a defensive pass interference. It was an out route to Ayuk on this outside. And I think if Ayuk doesn't get held, he probably turns that upfield and gets a good chunk of yardage. And I thought that was his best throw, but nobody's going to talk about it because it was an incomplete pass because of the pass interference. And then he followed that up. He had a first down throw to Charlie Warner that, it's a pretty easy throw, but it was up. And then Garoppolo's scramble was pretty fun. I thought that was probably the most.
That was nice.
That was a very fun play. That was the most pocket, mobility we've seen from him in a while.
He was aware of where everything was coming from. So that's that's another good thing. And then, everybody wants a mobile quarterback. Hey, it might have been 10 the entire time. No, it was good. I actually just watched that play, and he felt it coming, and he was able to navigate through. Good, good on him. He's not wearing a knee brace, so I don't know. I mean, you can talk about confidence all you want, but yeah, that was actually a really nice play.
Knee brace gate is back. We love it. And then obviously the interception, and I think there needs to be some nuance on this because yes, the throw was high. I'm always in the camp of, if a receiver gets two hands on it, might have to come down with it. I think it's kind of 50-50 there. Obviously the throw can be better. The throw obviously can be better, but Ayuk can get up. It gets tipped for the interception. And that's kind of what we've gotten used to seeing from Garoppolo at this point is good drives that come down to one bad throw and it kills the drive. And then Trey Lance comes in. He starts out very skittish. He's firing the ball. He had a couple high throws, and it kind of turned into a joke on Twitter, like who had the best high throws of the game. And then he really settled down. That the play to Trent Sherfield was I mean, on the TV, it looked like he was wide open, but then you look at the all-22, and when he released that ball, Sherfield was getting bumped by the linebacker. He knew he was going to be there. And then the touchdown throw to Sanu, I believe it was. Sanu, I mean, velocity is not an issue with Lance. Velocity is not an issue with Lance at all. It's just finding that touch, and I thought both played fine. I think Lance played better, and back to Jordan's point is I think – it's pretty apparent that Trey Lance, if we're just isolating the two guys, Trey Lance is the better quarterback. It's just sometimes there's more to that in terms of a starting NFL quarterback. And I think a big thing that comes into play is he's played 3 games in a year and a half now. Give him some time. We'll see what happens. Right now, I think Lance is the better quarterback, but I don't think it's surprising that Kyle Shanahan feels more comfortable with Jimmy Garoppolo.
One more thing, too, a little bit more to Jordan's point about watching, going through the progressions, right? That Travis Benjamin touchdown is a perfect example of it, right? Jordan, was he running? He was running Looky Squirrel, right? On that one. And, no,
Looky was the Sanu touchdown.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't that one. But you could see him work his way back, and he was able to get that ball out on time right to Travis Benjamin again. This is a kid who's not taking many reps, but he seems to be going through the progressions better. That Jordan absolutely nailed that one. And then you saw it pop up. It not only happened in camp, it happened in the game as well, too. So that's got to be a good sign for 49er fans.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that was the throw I was thinking about was this touchdown, the second touchdown, him looking off that linebacker. And Jordan, what about you? Did you see kind of consistent things as well from the game, from what you saw in practice?
Yeah, I thought it was the same thing. Both guys were missing high. I think the Jimmy interception was a little bit more concerning to me just because the biggest problem I have is that a lot of these interceptions are coming on balls that are going to receivers who are wide open. And again, people have a misconstrued definition. Like, I'm not talking about like when they're running leak and there's literally not a defender within 15 yards of the receiver. I'm talking if you get 2-3 yards of separation against an NFL defense, especially in man coverage, you are wide open in my book. And an NFL quarterback should be able to put the ball on you, on the numbers, in stride. And the biggest problem that we have to look at is so much of the 49ers offense is predicated on yards after the catch. And Kyle Shanahan scheming these receivers open so that they can get the ball in their hands in space and make plays. And we all know what Deebo Samuel can do with the ball in his hands. We got a glimpse of what Brandon Ayuk can do with the ball in his hands. If you go back to that interception, it's a pretty, elementary concept in Shanahan's offense. It's a tight end crosser, and if the crosser isn't there, you throw to the in-breaking route downfield, which is what Ayuk was running. So the tight end crosser wasn't there. Ayuk was pretty much wide open. It's about as open as you're going to get against an NFL defense, in my opinion. And that ball needs to be thrown better. It needs to be put on the numbers in front of him so he can catch the ball in stride. And, he probably houses that one, in my opinion, or at least has a chance to, based on the way the coverage was run. I would have to rewatch it if I remember correctly. Because I remember watching live, that was what I thought. There could have been a safety downfield. Again, I don't want to, sit here and be like, oh, they missed out on a touchdown because of that. But you put the ball in playmakers' hands and good things happen. So that's my biggest thing. And I thought Lance threw a couple balls. He threw a ball, I know, to Debo that was incomplete during the game. That was high and behind him as well. Lance, not like Lance has been lighting it up and been perfect too. I just think that the issue is the talking point is always, well, this guy's been in the league for 8 years, so he knows how to run this offense better, and he knows how to do this better. He's a veteran, and he's making a lot of mistakes that an 8-year veteran shouldn't make. And again, this isn't just, supposed to be a segment about dumping on Jimmy Garoppolo. It's just that it's the same thing. And like Jason said, you kind of know what you're going to get with him at this point. I thought that the mobility thing was big, though. The fact he was willing to utilize his legs, especially in a preseason game like that, to me is huge. He's been without the knee brace a lot longer now. And I think that the fact that he's able to run around like that without the fear of, I think it's a mental thing. Everybody that gets these ACL, injuries always speaks about it. If you hear these athletes, the recovery thing, you physically heal at a relatively quick rate. It's the mental part and trusting that leg again. So it could have been, it could have taken a couple years for him to really come back and be comfortable. And I think he knows now, hey, what do I have to lose at this point? I can't really sit here and play it safe with the knee brace. My job and my livelihood is on the line here. So the fact he was willing to scramble like that, I thought was huge. And even bigger than the running on that play was his pocket presence and the wherewithal to feel where the pressure was coming from, use good footwork within the pocket to evade it, and then tuck and run. So there was some good stuff from Jimmy too. It's just that one interception. And again, I sent a tweet out about it during the game too. We can sit here and point fingers all we want. Sure, there's balls that the receivers need to get their hands on. But I thought Lance's ball to Sanu, I thought that should have been placed better too. And I don't like if you get your hands on it, you need to catch it, because there's times where these guys are fully extended with how quick these windows close and how quick these balls come in. It's unrealistic to just expect every ball that a player gets their hands on, they should be able to catch. These balls should be placed better. And I think that that's ultimately a bigger issue that led to them wanting to invest in potentially upgrading. I don't say potentially. I think they drafted Trey Lance because they wanted to upgrade the quarterback position, because there's been so many of these plays between Mullins and Beathard and Jimmy since Kyle took over, even back to Brian Hoyer, where he's scheming guys wide open. He's getting them these tremendous looks where if they get the ball in their hands, they're going to rattle off these big chunk plays of 20, 25 yards, move the chains, keep these drives going. And these guys are consistently missing throws that just objectively, I think NFL quarterbacks should make with relative ease. But just to wrap it up, I thought that they know what they're going to get from Jimmy. And I think that it was great that they continued to let Trey get out there, because as we all saw, he started off kind of shaky and he picked it up great. That 2-minute drive that he led right before halftime, phenomenal. That throw down the field to Sherfield, some of these things that he's willing to do, I don't think it's necessarily that he's just so much better than Jimmy and Jimmy's unwilling to take these shots. I just think Lance's physical ability allows him to do things that Jimmy can't. And I understand that I'm kind of stating the obvious saying that, but that really does need to be factored in when we're talking about who's really going to get the reins to this offense over the course of the season. Because even if Jimmy starts week 1, I don't think that means that he's going to start for the full season. And I think that Lance, the way he's been playing, he's really applying pressure to Kyle and the brain trust there to make a decision, because while I don't think that he's outright overtaken Jimmy for that spot, I don't think the Niners, when they took him, and then even after OTAs, I don't think they expected to be in a spot where they would even have to think about it. I think they just figured, hey, we'll start Jimmy and see how it goes during the season. So I think that does need to be noted, how rapid Trey Lance has developed over the last 2 months or so since those OTAs in the beginning of June. And you can't deny the ability, the 2-point conversion that got called back, his ability to take a play that would have ultimately been a throwaway. If it was Jimmy or most quarterbacks in the league who aren't mobile, they're throwing that ball away. You're not getting points. I understand it got called back because of holding, but his ability to get all the way to that far pylon and barely get in past that last defender, there's very few quarterbacks who are going to add that dynamic to an offense. So I think that it was great that Trey Lance faced a little adversity, rebounded well, and then also showed the full spectrum of what he can do as a quarterback in this league.
One more thing I wanted to touch on too, because there were concerns in camp in Santa Clara about situational drills, right? And the first thing that jumped out was when Trey was put into a situational drill during a move the ball period, he was actually very good with quick passes, was able to spike the ball and set up a field goal. And then to see him translate that into the game at the end of the half, it goes to show how quickly he's picking things up. So yeah, he's applying pressure to this whole discussion because of plenty of what Jordan said, making something out of nothing, getting out of the pocket, being able to throw on the run, at least, getting the ball where receivers can catch it. But the situational stuff was the stuff that everybody wanted to see in terms of how can he handle high pressure situations, and you got to be good with the time management. Seems like he's picking that up as well. So, I mean, there's a lot to be excited about with him. No means perfect, but again, I like the fact that he keeps bouncing back every time that he starts a little bit slow or something happens. So the kid just never hangs his head ever, and he just gets back in there and keeps swinging. So that's another great thing for Trey Lance.
Perfect. And I think that's plenty on the quarterbacks. I think that's everything that's needed to be said. There's plenty of other spots to talk about on this team. Just touch on the running backs really quick. No Sermon, no Mostert. So this is a Wayne Gallman, JaMychal Hasty game. I thought they did fine. I thought Gallman looked really impressive. He had 15 carries for 72 yards. Hasty, he looked like what we've come to expect from him. He's very shifty behind the line. The big thing for me is no fumbles. I think that was a big thing, because that was something that felt like possibly would have cost him a spot. I mean, it still might. We'll see what happens with the cuts, because they got to cut to 53 by next Tuesday, I believe it is. So we'll see if Hasty survives. So I think the running backs did fine. I don't think there was anything that stood out exactly, because they didn't have any big runs or any touchdowns, but I think the running back position as a whole is fine on Sunday.
What I took away from it was that Mostert running camp on the first play on 11 on 11s, and he was gone. A touch on the small of your back is in the tackle. I don't know if those guys are getting their hands on him, and he just, he looks the part. So it's clear that they want to keep him wrapped up. In terms of Hasty, yeah, you definitely want to see him take care of the ball. And Elijah Mitchell was back at practice today, I heard. So again, that's only just going to make things more difficult as to who gets put on the practice squad or who gets waived. We just found out a few moments ago that Austin Watkins Jr. was waived. He's injured, so if he doesn't get picked up, then he'll revert back to IR, which I think there's a really good chance for that. I know that has nothing to do with running backs, but I wanted to make sure we got that out there. Yep. But yeah, Hasty looked good. Gallman is solid. If he's going to be pressed into duty, he's great in pass pro. I don't know if you guys saw Brian Baldinger break it down, but he's great in pass pro, which is something that, especially in times when the offensive line, we're talking about right guard being a bit of a concern. Everybody's going to have to pass pro. So I thought that Hasty looked fine. So did Gallman. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they work this out right now, because River Craycraft got cut. Austin Watkins gets waived. And now we got to see what's going to happen when they actually have to cut down to 53.
Yeah. And I think Trent Sherfield, if we're shifting to receivers as well, he's
a lock.
He's a lock. He put his stamp on it. I mean, it's to a point too. Like, is he? Because Jason, you and I and Jordan can touch on this too. Obviously, you and I were under the impression that Sanu's receiver 3 going into the preseason. Is Sherfield? And Jordan, we'll start with you. Do you think Sherfield's creeping up on that wide receiver 3, or you think it's just he's going to be receiver 3?
No, I think that it's going to be a timeshare.
Okay.
I think that Sanu definitely still has the advantage there. I think Sanu is very familiar with the scheme. He's very familiar with Kyle's route tree, what he has to do within this offense. And I think that he does a lot of things that may not get noticed, finding soft spots in zone coverage, just having a little bit of veteran savvy. Not to say Trent Sherfield hasn't been phenomenal. He's one of those guys that the first day that we were there at the beginning of training camp, we were like, wow, this guy's going to be more than a special teams player. He can really run routes. He can catch the ball. Like, he's a good NFL wide receiver. I just think that ultimately with Sherfield, it's not him not being good enough. It's just that I think that they have a role and vision for Sanu. And Sanu's, he's not massive by any means, but he's got a pretty good, size frame to him. He's a guy that can kind of play that big slot role that we know Kyle has been trying to implement in this offense for years and get some consistency out of. So I just think that Sanu is going to ultimately get his reps, again, due to the familiarity with Shanahan, due to the fact that I think he's played good as well. As good as Sherfield's been, I think Sanu's been very solid as well. I think those four, including Devo and himself, or Ayuk, sorry. And those guys are going to be the majority of targets to the wide receivers. Obviously, George Kittle factors in, as he's going to be one of the few tight ends that's going to be the primary option in the passing game, guy getting targets on their own team. So I think that ultimately between those 5, That's going to eat up the majority of the 49ers targets. And then, Jawan Jennings looked really good to start out camp. I thought that he's played pretty well.
Yep.
He's a guy that I think ultimately makes the roster as well. And then you get into that last spot, and it really does get dicey. I actually thought Richie James had a decent game. He's been pretty awful during most of camp. And I hate, I don't ever sounding pessimistic or sounding, negative about a player if I can help it, but just being completely objective. He's had a terrible camp. He's dropped the ball like crazy. He hasn't really added much value as a returner, in my opinion. So it was nice to see him break off a nice punt return. I thought he looked a little bit better. I just don't know if it's enough. I was hoping to see a little bit more Simba. Unfortunately, didn't get a chance to. So that sixth spot is really where it gets questionable, in my opinion, because I think the first five that we talked about are already spoken for. The sixth spot is really what's going to be interesting to watch. The reports coming out of practice through this week, and then obviously the Raiders game on Sunday.
Yep. I mean, I would say that Simba probably has the edge because he's actually been producing in the return game. They even use him on the jet sweeps. And, Jordan hit the nail on the head. I don't want to pile on, but the drops, they were happening in camp. They're happening in games. And it gets to a point, how it is with Kyle Shanahan. If you start to drop the ball, unless your name is, a certain player, he's not going to take that lightly. And we'll see how that works out. But, yeah, it got a lot more interesting, especially now that we just found out a few minutes ago that, Austin Watkins just got waived with an injury settlement. So he's out there to be picked up by anybody. So we'll see. I think that's going to be a really interesting part. River Craycraft, I thought, would be in that situation as well, too. He actually really had a nice block. He's the one who actually sprung the most to touchdown in 11 on 11s. It was a great block. You know how wide receivers have to block in the scheme. So, I think that's going to be really the portion that's going to get interesting is who's going to take that sixth spot and what do they value more? Is it going to be special team stuff? Is that what's going to put people over the edge? But I think Jawan Jennings definitely makes his roster too, as Jordan alluded to.
We're going to shift from the offensive side to the defensive side now. Roger, we didn't forget about your question. We're going to touch on it here in a second. The defensive line looked really good. 5 sacks, 9 quarterback hits. There we go. That's the stat I was thinking of. The defensive line is just going to be the defensive line. Zach Kerr had a very good game. Kentavious Street looked really good too. Mo Hurst, he looked good in his one series. I don't mean to cuss, but a high ankle sprain. He's going to be out for a month, unfortunately. So we're going to see if a spot's obviously going to open up. Jordan already touched on Jordan Willis. He had the safety in the sack. So we'll start with Roger's question because he has been patiently waiting and we appreciate it. Will Zach Kerr make this team, Jason? Yes.
I mean, especially with the Mo Hurst thing now and how good he's looked. And Jordan Willis, remember, is out 6 games with PED suspension. So that's another spot that's going to be opened up. Zach Kerr definitely is going to make this roster. I don't really have too many bones about that.
Yes, he will. And I think it's a matter of will he stay on the roster, because I think Mo Hurst, when he comes back, he's been so good, and he adds the ability to rush the passer from the interior. If you put him and Kevin Givens on the interior together on an obvious passing down, or him and Eric Armstead, like the different varieties of interior depth that you could put together, having him in that mix might be too much for them to turn down. And Zach Kerr has been awesome during training camp. There was a day where I thought he was the best player on the field. He had a couple days where he definitely looked like he belonged. 49ers defensive line, and I cannot stress this enough, this has to be like, I like, even before we were doing any of this stuff, just for my own amusement, I always liked doing, roster projections and trying to guess who would make the final roster. And I don't think I've ever had a time with a specific position group that was so difficult to project than it is with this defensive line. Because even beyond the guys we talk about a lot, guys like Yarbrough and Daniels and some of these other guys that are just kind of, looked at as fringe roster players, they could easily be the 9th or 10th defensive lineman on the majority of NFL teams. They've been that good. So I think it's going to be really tough. There might be a guy that they really like within that building that they end up keeping that, they might not be as big of a name to us, so we might overlook them in place of somebody like a Kerr. But I think that, the thing with Zach Kerr is that he is so good defending the run that they might opt to keep him too, just because he is like Maurice Hurst is really good rushing the passer. He does have a little bit of less of an edge than Kerr does against the run, and that might be something that factors in for them as well, because Kentavious Street's been so good at doing both. Kevin Givens has been pretty good doing both. that they might opt to keep the guy who is slightly lesser of a pass rusher, not as talented in that aspect, but can defend the run. But I could also, I think they're ultimately going to look at Maurice Hurst, and they're going to value the ability to rush the passer from that 3-tech spot a little bit more. So I think ultimately what ends up happening is he occupies that spot until Maurice Hurst comes back. And if they feel like Maurice Hurst is going to come back and be 100% from that ankle, I ultimately think that Zach Kerr ends up being the guy that gets cut, unfortunately, to make room for him. I personally, I'll add real quick, I wouldn't keep Nate Sudfeld. I don't think Nate Sudfeld's been bad at all. Jason and I were trying to tell people all throughout camp, everybody wanted to hear about Rosen. Rosen was not good. Sudfeld was better the entire time. And I think that was made evident by the fact that the 49ers decided to keep him. I do think, however, that the biggest difference this year is that, there's the COVID stuff going on, obviously. So you can't just cut the third quarterback in a way you could in previous years. That does have to kind of be a concern. But my stance is kind of, if you're getting to Nate Sudfeld, if you're getting past Jimmy and Trey and both of them can't play, how much better really is Nate Sudfeld than a guy you'd be able to pick up off the practice squad or pick up off the street? And I understand the familiarity with the offense and building rapport with receivers and all that stuff. But ultimately, if you're getting down to your third quarterback anyway, your chances of winning games aren't that great to begin with. So I would rather focus on what the team would look like while everybody's ideally healthy and you're at least on Jimmy or Trey, and sacrificing that third quarterback spot in place of an 11th defensive lineman, I think would be the prudent move. But I don't know if they'll do that because Kyle's been pretty adamant about wanting to keep the third quarterback.
Right, and throw him on the practice squad. And during COVID, if God forbid the room gets, one person gets in their close contact, and they both have to go, and you can bring up Sudfeld, who has the Scangarello, connection, and we talked about in the last episode, Andrew. I was just like, get Josh Rosen out of here, man. Like, it's done. And then eventually, like the next day, it was like done pretty much. But Sudfeld did outperform him the entire camp. Like, it pretty much wasn't even close. Like, Rosen would have that one throw that you'd be like, oh, there it is, but then he'd have 4 more like, oh, there it is. And Sudfeld just threw prettier passes. It just is what it is.
I mean, there's probably a reason that he's on his 4th team now. So it's rough. The NFL is definitely significantly different than college football. I think that goes without saying. Just to answer the question, yeah, I think Zach Kerr makes the team. It probably gets a little tricky when Mo Hurst comes back. We'll see who the odd man out is there. I think it's time to have the Diamador Lenore conversation. Where does he fit in? Because he's shown out in these 2 games. I believe his passer ratings is 0.0. I mean, are we talking about him up there with Jason Verrett, or are we talking him still rotational way? Where do you see him week 1, Jason?
I mean, he's probably going to be the cornerback 3 right behind Emmanuel Mosley just because of familiarity. But, my concerns with who is going to be playing after have been alleviated. And I don't want to overreact to preseason games, but in camp, Ambry Thomas has not looked good. And it's continued the entire time. This was a high pick again. So, like, I'm sorry that it comes off negative, but he's not performing well. Lenore, on the other hand, is performing out of his mind right now, and he's just doing so well. So it's really interesting because there was a huge concern. While it's not exactly a locked up situation, and obviously when you get to backups at any position on any team, it's not going to be a good thing. But Lenore has been so good, so fast. And it's got to be exciting for 49er fans to see because, as we said, my concern was if, God forbid, something happens to Verrett or Mosley, where does this cornerback room go? We saw BW Webb come in and go. They have some other guys, Dante Johnson, somebody who's going to, be on this roster no matter what, death taxes and Dante Johnson, and he'll be mixed in there. But Lenore offers so much more upside, and it's good to see that the 49ers are able to, at least so far, you don't want to overreact because the bullets haven't really started flying yet. Draft a cornerback and have him perform very well because the 49ers haven't done that in a long time.
I think – oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Jordan. I got you. Go ahead, Jordan.
No, I was just going to say, I think that Lenore is a guy – so I'm a Cal fan. Sad to admit that. I hate to say it's not been easy. So I watch a lot of Pac-12 football, and Oregon's secondary between him and Thomas Graham, who I believe is on the Bears. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure the Bears ended up drafting him. I thought that they had a pretty good secondary the last couple of years. So Lenore was a guy, he was, other than Trey Lance, anybody who's followed me for a while knows I did probably upwards of almost, I'm not even exaggerating the number, probably almost 1,000 mock drafts just in free time and, published a few. Lenore was literally one of the only guys that I had in my mock draft that actually ended up as a 49er. And at the time, I assumed he would be a project. I thought that he was a guy with a physical profile, that would fit well into the slot, sit for a year behind K'Wan Williams, and then next year when K'Wan goes to secure, a big deal elsewhere, just because I think the Niners are going to be so up against the cap that it's going to be hard to justify keeping a lot of these guys. And unfortunately, I think that while K'Wan has been great, it looked like the perfect segue into having a younger player take that spot. But the biggest thing about Lenoir is that he's been dominating on the outside. He's looked really good. D'Amico Ryans is going to run a lot more man coverage than Robert Saleh did. And I just think that Lenoir is a guy that just shows natural instincts. You can learn technique. You can learn to read quarterbacks' eyes. You can learn how to, bait quarterbacks into throwing into certain zones and things like that. But the cornerback position is highly instinctual, in my opinion. And I just think that the guy has the instincts needed to play that spot, particularly on the outside. I thought when he had to go one-on-one 3 or 4 times in that first preseason game with Tyreek Hill, he more than held his own. And I understand it's a preseason game, and Tyreek Hill's probably not going at 100%. But the fact that he was able to take that challenge head on and look as good as he did, I thought was tremendous. So I'm very excited about Lenoir. So ultimately, I'll say I've been, I've liked him since he was coming out of Oregon. I liked him in the pre-draft process, but I completely misdiagnosed how the 49ers would utilize him. I thought he would just be a slot corner, and he's proving to be much more than that. So while I will say that I'm not surprised that he's been good, I definitely have to admit that I completely was off about how he would be used, and I think that he does deserve a lot of credit for the work he's clearly put in that's allowing them to utilize him as kind of a second corner. I do think that Emmanuel Moseley is the better option now. I'm not saying that I think Lenoir should start. I think Moseley would be the much safer option, but I feel much better now than I would have 10 days ago or 2 weeks ago. Should Moseley go down or Brett go down for a game, I think Lenoir would be able to step into that role and look really good, because I think we all remember how bad it got last year, that Miami game. I hate piling on Brian Allen, but when he had to come in and clearly wasn't prepared to take on that role, we saw how just one position made the entire defense crumble, essentially. So I think that they're in a much better spot, and the infrastructure in that secondary is much better.
Especially with Hufanga.
Yeah, and I was going to say that because, Lenoir has probably been the biggest riser on this defense. We talked about some struggles early in camp. The other one, and we knew he was going to be decent. I think Hufanga has looked amazing. And with Jaquazi Tart coming off the PUP list, he's obviously your starting safety week 1. How are the Niners going to get him snaps? Because I think he deserves them. And I think the easy answer is just move him up to linebacker, kind of play him in that hybrid role. Is he forcing more of an issue than you thought, Jason?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, he's at the line like Palomalu, like making tackles for loss. I hate to keep saying that because I'm tired of just people saying, oh, he's like Palomalu. And that's so disrespectful to both of them, because one is so great. And I'm not saying that he can't be those heights, but it's hard to put those expectations on him. But when you see him at the line and he's right in the backfield for a TFL, he seems to be all over the place. Point back to the Kansas City game where they had him running single high, and that's a lot of trust that he had. He did have that pass interference on the Tyreek Hill throw where he got there just a smidge early, but the guy has good instincts. We're gonna see when things start to really happen if they force his way on there. So again, Tart's gonna start as long as he's healthy, and that's fine, and then it's gonna have to happen if they're gonna run more, with more people in the secondary than they are linebackers, or if they're just gonna put Hufanga in one of those spots. So gonna be interesting to see. I'm sure he's not making it easy on those guys in that decision, because he has looked very, very good.
Beautiful. Yeah, no, I've liked what I've seen. Jordan, do you have any thoughts on Hufanga and what you've seen?
No, just that he is a guy that came in. Jason remembers we were getting there about an hour before each practice started, and he was the only player that was beating us out there. He was out there very early, stayed on the field late, and I understand it's very cliche, and it sounds really good to say first guy in, last guy out, but he really clearly took on the challenge of improving his coverage. That's mainly what he was working on with the DB coaches before practice started. Footwork, understanding where he needs to play in certain zones. And we saw over the course of camp, not only did he shoot up the depth chart, but his responsibilities also increased. And he went from playing a little bit more in the box, so they were actually leaving him in single high with the first team. So you have to remember he's a 5th-round pick. He's somebody that's going to definitely take some time to adjust and acclimate once the regular season rolls around and we go from, as great as it is to evaluate these guys in training camp practices and preseason games, it's nothing like it's nowhere close to the level of speed and actual competition they'll face in the regular season. So I think they're in a great spot. I know Tart is a friend of the pod, and he is the unsung hero of this defense. He is a guy that does so much and gets such little recognition for it, and I think it's awful, but he is so good at what he does, and whenever he's gone, his absence is really felt. So I think that him coming back for week 1, which is what looks like is going to happen, is truly the best case scenario, and then it gives them a chance to develop Talanoa should they get to a spot where, again, let's hope that Tart goes out there and plays phenomenal this year. He plays the way that we know he's capable of playing. He gets through the majority of the season without getting hurt. Ultimately, he might be a guy that the 49ers can't re-sign next year because, again, it's going to get really tough. This year, they were able to pull off some front office magic. It's unrealistic to expect them to be able to bring everybody back. So should Tart get offered a big payday somewhere else, which he most assuredly deserves, they might then be able to bring in his replacement and have him, sort of molded over the course of the season rather than just throwing him out there and having defenses take advantage of a rookie who was picked in the 5th round who, while has shown flashes, it's not fair to expect that he's just going to be able to go out there and roll with starters when the action really heats up in the regular season.
Beautiful. Well, we're at about 50 minutes here, so I think it's 3 stars time. I think this is a good place to have it. Week 2, as I said, Niners win 15-10. I'll start just because my 3rd star, man, I just want to give the 3rd star to the guy who was the only one who played 100% of the snaps on his side of the ball, Jalen Moore. I know he had the holding on Trey Lance's 2-point conversion. Other than that, I didn't notice him, which I think is very good for a tackle. And I just want to say a guy's name who played 100% of the snaps in a preseason game. So I'm gonna use that for Jalen Moore, 3rd star.
Yep, and I'll go with my 3rd star. Damn it, I lost it. I had it. Trent Sherfield. Again, it's just he continues to make plays. And again, people, have asked me, oh, well, how much does what's going on with Trent Sherfield have to do with Trey Lance? Some of it, but not all of it. He's been open no matter who the quarterback is, and every single quarterback has been targeting him. I just a steal right now for a guy that we thought was going to be an absolute just special teams guy has now ascended into that wide receiver 3 role, in my opinion. So yeah, Trent Sherfield continues to make plays and continues to show that he's much more than just a special teams gunner or punt returner.
So I'm sorry. How does this work? Do we just do 1 or is it 3?
3 stars. So 3, then 2, then 1. Yeah.
So you're gonna do your 3rd star, and then we'll go around again.
Yep.
Okay. So for the 3rd star, I'm gonna go Mike McGlinchey just because I think that it was very unfortunate. This is literally a story as old as time with Mike McGlinchey. He has one bad pass rep where he gets driven back in a bull rush by the opposing defensive lineman, and then everybody goes into this huge panic and they start dumping all over him and saying that he sucks. Mike McGlinchey set the tone in the run game. I thought that he held up well on literally every other pass pro rep that he had, other than the one that I'm sure most people have seen on Twitter by now. Mike McGlinchey had a great game. He's looked great during camp. He's definitely gotten more comfortable with the added weight over time. Mike McGlinchey is good at football, and I will say that until I am blue in the face because I am so sick of people dumping on Mike McGlinchey and undermining how much value he brings to this team. And I understand people, they run with this narrative like, oh, he's a good run blocker, but he's not good in pass pro. Kyle Shanahan wants to run the ball. They literally won the biggest game of the season in 2019 that was not the Super Bowl by just running the ball over and over and over again. If Kyle Shanahan could win a game in the NFL without throwing once, he would do it without hesitating. And Mike McGlinchey makes not that necessarily that specific example possible, but Mike McGlinchey does so much for what Kyle and this offense wants to do. And especially when you factor in that Mike McDaniel, the genius and the mastermind behind so much of what makes that run game successful, is now the offensive coordinator. Mike McGlinchey has tremendous value. So again, I'm so happy. I know you guys are pro Mike McGlinchey as well. I just hope people understand that there's so much more to being an offensive lineman than having one bad rep put on film. It really is a thankless job. And I think that Mike McGlinchey gets so much unfair criticism that I will, defend him until the end of time, because I just think it's ridiculous how much this guy just gets, negativity thrown his.
Some would say the Spirit Airlines of the 49ers offensive line. I'm going to go 2nd star. I'm going to go Zach Kerr. He was probably the guy on the defensive line that stood out the most. I knew Jordan Willis had the sack. I don't know. I felt like Kerr, the play that impressed me the most with Kerr, he had the knockdown on a Willis pressure that he got held on. You don't see it too often, defensive tackles making tackles on screens to receivers. He read it quick, got out there. So yeah, I'm going to go Zach Kerr. He stood out the most to me on that defensive line.
Yep. I'm going to go Jordan Willis then. I mean, just again, just everything that's been happening has been happening now in games, and that sack was impressive. And, another thing, when we evaluate these defensive players, you got to remember Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, none of these guys really played. So, yes, you want to say, hey, this guy had a great game, but it's not like they were locking down or doing things to the first team offense. So, again, I'm not trying to be negative or anything like that. It's just like, let's put some context to it. But Jordan Willis has been incredible. And it's so strange how, last year we had, Kerry Hyder. We were big Kerry Hyder fans. How much of that had to do with Chris Kocurek? Almost the same thing with Jordan Willis. This organization has shown that they're going to take chances on players who have high grades, high spark scores and things like that, athleticism, and try to cultivate that. Seems like Chris Kocurek's a mad genius. It's not all about the yelling, but I guess it's what he's telling them about with the technique as well too. So yeah, Jordan Willis, I mean, I know that he's going to be out for 6 games, but it's going to be really good to have him come back because, I know that we don't want to talk about this and put this out in the air, but by the time week 6 rolls around, there will be injuries to this team and there will be a spot for him to come back. And if he can come back and immediately contribute, then it's just going to be a feather in the cap of the 49ers. And I know Jordan would like that feather in the cap thing there.
And in the mold of the previous star, I will say on the defensive line, I think Kevin Givens is so good. He's a guy that does not get enough credit as well. He's super athletic. I put out something last night when I rewatched all the defensive snaps that I think that the athleticism that the defensive tackles have is just tremendous. And I thought that Givens played a really good game and just had so much burst and explosion, rushing the interior, defending the run, just all around a solid game. And again, a lot of the times we see these guys in the trenches, they're not going to get the credit that they deserve. And I just think that Kevin Givens has been phenomenal. Not just this, preseason, really since he's been given a prominent role on the team. He's just been a player that's kind of flown under the radar, I feel like.
All right. And my number 1 star, I'm going to go Trey Lance. He started out super slow. We got a hell of a tweet out of it from Mina Kimes. Depending on what time you logged into this app tonight, Trey Lance is either a bust or the second coming. That 2-minute drill, I mean, not even a 2-minute drill. He had a minute. He got down the field. He's so damn good. And I feel like that's something I'm going to say every week until the end of time. He looks the part. Yes, he started slow. That's an issue within itself. I think that's something that's going to work itself out. But once he got rolling and once that confidence started clicking in and he started honing in those bullets he's throwing, it looks so good out of his hands. So I'm going to go Trey Lance number 1.
Yep, I'm going to steal probably an obvious one, Demo Lenore, because I'm tired of trying to say his first name perfectly in one shot. I'm never going to get that right. It's going to take me 2 or 3. But, again, for something that was a huge concern for me when it came to secondary, because, during the joint practices, I posted one of the reps. Keenan Allen kind of got the better of Jason Verrett. And that's less about Jason Verrett not being good and more about how good Keenan Allen is. But again, once and it goes back to Jordan's point, you end up with Brian Allen in games and guys can just pick your whole defense apart and ruin things that way. So if Lenore is showing that he's ready to step up now, if he's pressed into duty, then that's nothing but a great thing. And again, it's really good because the 49ers have rarely drafted a cornerback, developed him, and had him be an impact player. So that, Lenore continues to impress, and 49er fans should be excited.
And for me, the biggest star of the game was Kentavious Street, in my opinion. He has had a just incredible rise. When camp started, I just assumed he would be the odd man out because of how good everyone else was. And now I'm pretty close to saying he's a lock to make the team. I don't like speaking in absolutes, particularly when I don't have any, insider info outside of my own speculation, but he's been so good. I thought he demonstrated his ability to, again, defend the run, rush the passer. They're running stunts with him all the way across the formation. He can line up at edge. He can play 3-tech. He can clog the gaps on these rushing attempts up the middle. He's just so good at everything. And he is a guy that I think we're finally seeing, sort of redemption arc for a player that, had a setback. He tore his ACL on his pro day. And I think he's finally getting back to that 100% health level. And we're really seeing what he can do. So Kentavious Street is a guy who I think has not only had a great game, but his rise over the course of camp, incrementally, he's gotten so much better week in and week out. I'm really excited to see what he can do this year.
Just to back that up a little bit, in the joint practices, whoever their backup center was getting absolutely demolished by. It was disgusting. Like it was very bad. And Corey Linsley is an all-pro that's starting there, but their backup was getting worked, and it was just Street just throwing this giant man around. He was that good.
Perfect. Well, we're at about an hour, so we're going to wrap it up here. Jason and I will be back Monday with the last preseason game review. We'll have a week and a half of just talk of what we thought of everything, and then we're back on that grind. The now 18-week grind of 49ers football. They'll get 17 games. It starts with the Detroit Lions, and I'm a little sad when that game's going to end because I am going to miss Detroit Don Burr in our comments. He's very, very passionate about his Lions, and I love it. I love the confidence in his team.
So wait, you're predicting that Don Burr is going to disappear from our comments because the 49ers are about to beat the Lions. Is that what you're saying?
I just think he might not have a reason to come back since the Niners aren't playing the Lions all 17 games.
Okay.
So I'm going to miss him because I've really liked his passion. Jordan, we really appreciate you having you on. I wish we could have you on every week for the rest of the life or the rest of my life because you're just that good at what you do. Do you have anything coming up? Actually, I know you're writing articles with Niner Nation. You have anything coming up that you want to plug real quick?
Not necessarily. Just you can follow me at Niners Nation. You can follow me on Twitter. My ad's down here. I will have something out this week. I think I will be writing something actually about Contavious Street tonight. That'll probably go up either tomorrow or the next day. But you can follow me on Twitter, like I said, and then Niners Nation. I will try to put out at least 3 articles a week. And when the season rolls around, I will hopefully be doing some game previews with the opposing teams chapter of SB Nation as well. So we'll get some insight from the writers who are covering the other team as a part of SB Nation with their own individual chapters. So that's kind of the main thing that I have going now. But yeah, you can find all my work on there. And thanks for having me on, guys. It's always a blast talking football with you guys.
Yep. And then, for everybody who's watching on YouTube, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you like it, it'll help us out a lot, bump us up on the algorithm. And thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for all the kind words down there who have been watching our podcast and said so many nice things about the content. It's I'm forever humbled and I'm honored. I'll never get used to any of that stuff. So it was a blast, another great week. But yeah, I'm ready to get going into the season so we can get back to game previews, game reviews with, film, stuff like that. So it's an exciting time right now for 49ers, especially that we found out that pretty much every starter that's going to be available is going to be playing in this Raiders game. So I think it's going to be very interesting to find out where guys stand.
And Luis, we appreciate the donation. It means
Absolutely.
the world to us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll have some very fun ways to support the podcast here coming up in the next couple of weeks. Jason Aponte, as always.
Let's go Niners. And the Yankees are the hottest team in baseball. Hottest team in baseball.
There you go. Hey, have a good day, guys.
All right.